Welcome to the Dare to Multiply podcast. On this podcast, we help passionate Jesus followers become courageous, obedient disciples who impact their communities for the kingdom of God. I'm your host, Cynthia Anderson, a disciple multiplication coach and trainer. We have some amazing guests coming up, people who are taking risks to launch new discipleship movements in their areas. I can't wait to learn from them and introduce you to their ministries. Together, we'll show you how to make and multiply disciples and groups in your area. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any tools or content coming your way. I also wanted to mention a free newsletter on disciple making that I send out every single week. It's called Daring Disciples, and it's all about how to share your faith, overcome obstacles we all face in the journey toward multiplication. To subscribe to that, go to daretomultiply.com/newsletter. Let's dare to multiply. Don't start by talking about Jesus. When you want to have a spiritual conversation with someone, we want to start in a natural, friendly way. Today, I'm going to be talking about why you don't start by talking about Jesus or inviting someone to church. And I'll be right back with that podcast in just a moment. Are you busy but not seeing the fruit you long for? Dissatisfied with your present level of impact on those around you? Or frustrated with traditional methods of discipleship that don't seem to be effective? If so, the Getting Started in Disciple Making Movements course may be just what you need. Inside the Getting Started program, you'll get access to a step-by-step proven approach to making and multiplying disciples. Not only will you receive 25 short and practical video teachings spread out over 6 modules, but you'll have a chance to connect with others for group coaching via our monthly Zoom calls. And even more importantly, you'll become part of a global community of like-minded people from all over the world who are passionately committed to following Jesus and impacting others around them. If you want to get unstuck and begin moving forward as a disciple who makes disciples, I encourage you to go to courses.dmmsfrontiermissions.com and sign up for this powerful program today. And now to today's episode. All right, so I apologize in advance for my voice. I've got a little bit of a cough and cold going on here, but I wanted to be sure to go ahead and jump on and share with you what God's been laying on my heart about this. I've just come back from a trip to Nepal where we were training disciple makers. I got my little gagro here. This is a little Nepali water pot that they gave me. And all over Nepal, they carry these around. If you're just listening in, you got to check the YouTube to see me lifting that up as I'm doing right now. Little Nepali water pot to remind me to pray for Nepal that I have here on my desk. We were given so much honor in this trip, and I have all kinds of what we call these are katas that they put around your neck when they honor you. And we were so blessed to be back in the country that we served in for many years and to speak Nepali. I got to preach in Nepali again. It was super fun. But it got me thinking about something really important. And as we were training the church planners and disciple makers there in Nepal, I told them this. I said, don't start by talking about being a Christian or about Jesus or about church, especially as we were teaching the way to share your story with people. And somebody raised their hand and said, I don't understand. How could you say we shouldn't start with Jesus? And so I explained that to them, and I thought, this is so important that we understand how to connect with people as Jesus did with the woman at the well. Classic example, connect with people first as people. And then slowly you can move to the gospel, but you have to know how to first connect. And many times when we start with the word Jesus or Christian or church, right away, you're going to have a wall go up where people don't want to listen to you. And so, if you've been trying to share the gospel and trying to reach out to people and you are finding them resistant, it may not be that they are resisting the gospel really, but they are resisting the way that you are pushing that on them right from the beginning. And so, we need to learn how to ask those kinds of bridging questions that connect us to people heart to heart before we introduce what Jesus has done for us and the good news that we have to share with them. This is so important. And I was also praying and reading the word this morning only, and I read a passage that really struck me as we think about how do we begin as we share this amazing good news that we have to share about Jesus with people. How do we begin? And I wanted to talk about this passage with you. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen. Matthew 9:36 through Matthew 10, verse 1. And those chapter breaks are something that were superficially put in later, right? And I think this really flows together well without the chapter breaks. So I'm going to read this, and then we want to talk about this in light of this question of how do you begin? What's the first thing we need to do? What's the first thing that is necessary as we share the great and amazing good news of Jesus Christ with others? So let me read this. Matthew 9, verse 36. When he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dejected like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest." And summoning his 12 disciples, he gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to heal every disease and sickness. So, this is such a beautiful passage. And as I was reading this in my quiet time this morning, I thought, this is exactly what I was talking about, the step by step process described here in scripture of how we share the good news of Jesus with others. As we look at that passage, the first thing we see is that Jesus saw the crowds. He saw the multitudes and he had compassion on them, for they were sheep without a shepherd. Jesus, before he sent his disciples out, the first thing we see is that he saw the people. He saw their need. He saw their brokenness. And as followers of Jesus, as we begin to engage with lost people, the first thing we need to do is to see them. We need to see their need. We need to see who they are. We need to recognize their desperation and see how much they are lost and without their sheep without a shepherd. They are hopeless and struggling, right? So you have to connect with that point of desperation in people. You have to do that through asking gentle questions. Like a great question I love to ask people is, what is the best thing that ever happened to you in your life? And a lot of times when I ask that question, people will share something really amazing, wonderful that happened. And I say, that's incredible. And that's a point of connection. And then I can say, can I share with you the best thing that ever happened to me? And then I talk about some of my own brokenness and how I came out of that into life with Jesus. And as I talk about my brokenness and that area of struggle I was in before I connected with Jesus, before I knew him, as I share about that, often you will see recognition in their eyes. You'll see them begin to also say, that's me too. When I share my hopelessness, when I share I was depressed, when I share about broken relationships that were in my life, often I will see a point of connection in their eyes or their head nodding, like they can relate to that. We have to connect with people in desperation. Jesus saw their need. He saw their brokenness. He recognized it, and he ministered into that point of brokenness with them. And then it is when he says, the harvest is abundant, the workers are few. Pray the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. We see that Jesus saw their need, and then he said, we need to go to them. We need to do something to engage with them. The first thing we need to do is recognize the brokenness in the people around us. So why don't we do that? Often I really believe it's because we are focused on our own brokenness and struggling so much in our own hopelessness, in our own sense of being overwhelmed by life. We are so busy. We're struggling to pay our bills. We're struggling in relationships ourselves. And when we are in pain ourselves, we can become pretty narcissistic. We can become pretty self-focused. And we don't even notice or see the brokenness in the people around us. I want to encourage you, take time to look at people. Jesus saw them. He saw the multitudes. He saw their neediness, and he responded to them in compassion. If we try to go out and share the gospel and we don't have the love and compassion of Jesus for the brokenness of this world in our hearts, for broken people in our hearts, we are not going to be fruitful in our evangelism efforts. We need to take time to look and ask God. If you're struggling yourself, ask God, God, heal me. I want to experience your healing touch in my own life so I can overflow to others. Recognize your own self-focus and your own inwardness and say, Jesus, I want to care about other people today. Help me to see what other people are going through, not only to focus on my own struggles. Help me to see the people around me like you saw them. The very first thing we need, if we're going to be effective in evangelism, is we need to see people. They need to feel seen by us, heard by us. So engage with them. Ask them a question about themselves. And as they share, if they share a struggle with you, enter into that pain with them and begin to minister the love of Jesus. So the next thing that Jesus said is, he said, the harvest is ripe, the laborers are few. And he sent then his disciples into the harvest. He said, go, make disciples of all nations. He sent them out into those harvest fields. He also told us to pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers. And if we will begin to pray for people to go into that ripe harvest among the broken, among those who are lost sheep without a shepherd, into the brokenness of the people's lives around us, if we begin to pray that God will send others, we also need to be ready to go ourselves. Now, some of us are going to be called to go, to another country, or to go to an inner city area, or to go into a place, a brothel or a bar, to minister the love of Jesus. Some of us have that calling, and we need to be obedient to that. But all of us, every single follower of Jesus, is called to go across the street, to go have that conversation with a coworker, to go into your school or your college, and to be willing to see the people around you and engage in conversation with them and minister into those places of brokenness. Not by saying, oh, I've got it all figured out, but by saying, I've been there. I know what it's like to feel hopeless. I know what it's like to feel like my marriage is falling apart. And this is how Jesus met me in that place. I would love to share that with you. Right? So we start with seeing. We don't start with Christianity. We don't start with the church. Again, we were training people how to share their 3-part story: before I met Jesus, how I met Jesus, and what changed after I met Jesus. We were sharing about this, and I was listening to one brother practice, right? And we often do this in our trainings. And as he shared his story, he shared more about the church and going to church than he shared about the transformation of meeting and encountering Jesus. And I said, you know what? We are not calling people to church. We're calling people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I said, you need to talk more about Jesus when you get to that middle part of sharing your story. So there is a point where we talk about Jesus. We must talk about Jesus. How could we ever do evangelism without talking about him and how he's changed our lives? But we don't want to start there. We want to start by connecting with people around something they can relate to. And that often comes by vulnerably sharing our own story of transformation, saying, I was lost. I was so messed up. I was so discouraged. I was in this horrible place. And then this is how my life has changed. And I still don't have it all figured out, but I know I'm a different person today. And God can give you that same kind of experience if you're interested. We could talk more about that, right? We can share with people in a natural way the great good news that he's given us. But it doesn't start by talking about Christianity, because honestly, there are a lot of people who are not interested in Christianity. And that is true not only among Muslims and Buddhists and, people who are atheists. That is true even in Christian America, so-called Christian America, because people have been so turned off and so hurt by the attitudes of so-called Christians around them, and that are projected through social media and different ways and means, right? So don't start there. Start with compassion. Start by seeing them. And I also just want to say that don't be in a hurry. If that first conversation, all you do is listen to their story and you don't even share your own story, that's okay. Connect, find a point of connection where you begin to see them and they feel seen and heard by you. Then you'll have an opportunity and a door to share more about the good news of Jesus. So again, don't start with Jesus. Don't start with Christianity. Start with compassion. Start by seeing them. All right, I'll be right back in a few minutes with a quick wrap up.
Imagine a world where passionate followers of Jesus come together to multiply, transforming lives beyond imagination. Instead of toiling with little fruit, what if God's abundance flowed beyond your wildest dreams? Picture those you've invested in sharing Jesus freely, creating a ripple effect of disciple-making. In her new book, The Multiplier's Mindset, Cynthia Anderson reveals how shifting mindsets can revolutionize disciple-making. When Cynthia and her colleagues experienced these mindset shifts, they saw enormous results, including the launching of 19 multiplying movements in Africa and Asia, transforming tens of thousands of lives. This book will help you discover hidden harvesters, see church members move from passivity to passion, and release the power of simplicity in multiplying disciples. Don't remain stuck. Learn to move toward greater fruitfulness. Visit multipliersmindset.com and get your copy of The Multiplier's Mindset today.
All right. Again, this was a short one. I don't have a voice that's very good today. So quick key points that I want to make is we don't start with Christianity. We don't even start with Jesus. We start with connection. Connect with people and see them, hear them, have compassion on them. We start with compassion, and then we can move into sharing our story of transformation. Start with compassion. And I just want to say, as we wrap up this podcast today, if compassion isn't something you feel, just admit that. Say, Lord, I really don't feel much of anything for lost people around me. Sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes I feel judgmental. But I really don't have empathy and compassion towards the brokenness of people around me. And I am focused on myself and my own needs because they feel so overwhelming. Lord, would you help me? I just want to invite you to pray that prayer to Jesus today. Say, Lord, give me compassion for the lost. That same compassion you had when you saw the multitudes and you said they are sheep without a shepherd. And then you told us to pray. I want to have that kind of compassion that Jesus had towards broken people around him. I want to be filled with Jesus's compassion, and just pray that prayer. And so I would encourage you, do a little evaluation. Has my heart grown jaded towards those who are away from Christ? Has my heart grown cold towards them? And ask Jesus to fill you afresh with compassion and to show you how to see people, truly see them, how to engage with them with questions that give them opportunity to share their brokenness with you, and to be a trustworthy person who will not try to convert them, but who will listen and who will care and who will pray for them in that point of desperate need. All right. God bless you guys. We'll see you on our next podcast next week. Have a wonderful week.
That's all we've got for this episode of Dare to Multiply. One thing that would really help both us and other people who might like to listen in is for you to rate and review the podcast, if you haven't done that yet, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'd also love to connect with you on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Feel free to message me with any topics, questions you'd like addressed, or guests you'd like me to interview. Until next week then, please remember, no matter how ordinary you feel, God's dreams for us are always bigger than we can imagine. Let's dare to trust Him for a greater harvest.